Hi everyone. Have you ever wondered that it is very important that the crop that we are cultivating? So there could be the crop wild relatives that will be thriving somewhere else, and they are kind of unique as well as they are very important. Why they are important is because they have a different genetic makeup. They survive through the hardships of the wild nature, and thereby they are more disease resistant, they are drought resistant, and thereby these varieties they actually serve as a very important genome, you can say, reservoir for the complete makeup of those crops that we are cultivating today. Now, therefore, this is very important that when it comes to such kind of discovery, they are quite important. Now, I'm talking about a rice variety which had been a rice grain that had started, or it was, in the wild right before the agriculture had started itself. Now, this is about the region that is there in the Assam. And in the Sonitpur district, I'm talking about Borjuli site. This is a wetland that had been declared as the Biodiversity Heritage Site, protecting the wild ancestor of the rice that actually feeds most of the India. So this pertains to your GS paper 3, where we talk about environment, the biodiversity as well. Now, when it comes to the complete news, so it was in 2022, where there were the team of researchers. They were from the National Bureau of Plant Genetic Resources. They combed the wetlands of the Sonitpur. And that was actually not for the better, paddy, but it was for the forgotten wild ancestor that we are talking about. Now, there is also Assam State Biodiversity Board that partnered on the ground to identify Borjuli and recommended it for the notification and to connect the scientific work to the state level governance. So we have over here the State Biodiversity Board that was also instrumental in identifying the site. And then we have the Sonitpur's wetland communities, because ultimately when it comes to this community, which is here, so there is the everyday low intensity use of the marshland or the wetland that is here, but never a threat to the plant. Over here, this makes the local farmers the sites, default guardians, you can say, or the unpaid guardians as well. And on 2nd of July, Dr. Chandrasekhar Kumar, IAS and the CEO of NRAA, he was briefed on the project's achievements and called for replicating of this in-situ models for the other crops, wild relatives as well. Now, this is about in-situ conservation or in-situ model. Now, what is in-situ is in its natural reservoir. That is where the plant or the species is found naturally. Now, we have the another conservation model as well that is called as ex-situ, where we conserve the species. All right, that is out of their, the natural environment that is there. Like, for example, we have zoo, we have also, aquarium, and also we have the seed banks that are there. So that is the ex-situ conservation that we are talking about. Now, over here, it is very important that when it comes to the complete perspective, so it is about that can India modernize its agriculture without erasing the wild plants that made that agriculture possible in the first place. So every high yield variety that is there, it is basically about, narrowing the genetic resource or the genetic diversity, and every relative that stands standing, that is left standing, it is basically in a forgotten wetland is insurance policy against the next unknown disease, drought, or even flood. Because, right, like I said in the start of the session itself, that there is the vivid and the varied, you will find the genetic biodiversity or the genetic makeup in these wild plants. So we'll be discussing about this in this session. But before this, if you are preparing for the civil services for 2027, 28 or 29, then you can join the GS Foundation batch on the platform of StudyIQ by using the code that is BRS Live. That will give you the maximum discount. Now, when it comes to this, strain or the variety that we are talking about, so over here, the rice had been domesticated in the Ganga Brahmaputra belt right from the wild Oryza species, which actually include the Oryza rufipogon and even Oryza nivara as well. So this was, I'm talking about nearly about 4000 BC. Then when it comes to 1960s, 70s, so this was the period where India started with the National Agriculture Development Program, or NADP. And there was the Green Revolution later on that spreads narrow and ultimately high yield varieties. Like, for example, we have IR8, that is a high yield variety of rice. And ultimately, later on in 1976 also, we have the NBPGR that was established, which began systematic ex-situ seed conservation. And it was about the seed banks that it was basically mandated to preserve. Then there was a turning point that was from 1992 to 2002, where we had the Rio Convention on the Biodiversity that led to the enactment of the Biodiversity Act in India as well, that is Biological Diversity Act of 2002. Now, over here, we have section 37, that is a non-restrictive community-based conservation tool that is, utilized over here, which is just, away from the conservation method that we use for the national parks and the sanctuaries, where it is basically a restrictive model that we use. All right. Now, from 2022 to 2026, we had the NRA funds that had funded the ICR NBPGR's In-situ wild rice project in Sonitpur. And ultimately, right now, we can see on 2nd of July, we have the Borjuli that had been identified and notified as the BHS or the Biodiversity, heritage site in India. So it is all about the continuity. There is the continuity that we have seen of this wild rice growing in the region or in Borjuli's wetland. But at the same time, this is about, giving the protected structure and the stature for the Borjuli's wetland that we are speaking about. And also this is about how we can see that ultimately there are the two ministries which came together. We have the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, where we have the NBA, that is National Biodiversity Authority, which actually notifies the BHS or the Biodiversity Heritage Sites, regulates the access and the benefit sharing as well. And then we have the State Biodiversity Boards as well, which recommends the site. And we have the BMC, that is Biodiversity Management Committee, which is basically responsible for the grassroots record keeping. Then we have another ministry, that is Ministry of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare, where we have NRAA, that is National Rainfed Area Authority, which funds the in-situ conservation projects. And ultimately, we have the ICR NPPGR, that is the National Bureau of Plant Genetic Resources, which explores, conserves and characterizes the various germplasm. So both of them, they converged at the Borjuli, where we have the Ministry of Agriculture. Its science have identified and studied the wild variety of the rice that we are talking about, and ultimately it had been notified as the BHS or Biodiversity Heritage Site by the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. So this is where you can see that we have the coordination between two of the ministries that are there, and they are under the union government. And also over here, you can see the coordination model, where we have the union ministry, they have they have the state boards which are there. And also we have the ground level monitoring and even ground level identification that had been done by the local participation. So it is basically a coordination method or model that could, that relates to the cooperative federalism as well. Now, over here, it is not just about the environment and agriculture, because ultimately this is also about genetic security and as the national security. Because if we are losing the wild relative, so it is about losing an option where we have no future breeding program that we can create. And this is the irreversible risk that we are talking about. Also, this is about the cooperative federalism in the environmental law, where Section 37 is the center which sets the law. Then the state notifies and the local body consults the model, which is basically very in contrast. You can say it is just to contradict the Center Heavy Wildlife Protection Act regime that is there. Then we have the conservation, that is without the eviction, where the biodiversity heritage sites. Over here, they deliberately reject the fortress conservation model of the national parks. And here we have the community-led protection that is basically provided. And also there is the anticipatory climates resilient agriculture, where we have the wild rice traits, we have the genome that is present, and ultimately whether it is submergence, whether it is salinity or the pest tolerance. So these varieties are far much better at the resilience capacity, and thereby these genes can be utilized for developing a new hybrid variety as well. We can compare this with the models that are followed in the world as well. Like, for example, in India, we have Section 37 of the Biodiversity Act, where it is about in-situ conservation, and also this is community inclusive. And ultimately, you can see that there is the legal recognition, it is non-restrictive, and we have around 44 of the sites in total 16 states. Then there is Philippines. In Philippines, there is RRI Gene Bank in Los Banos. So there is ex-situ conservation, which is the global public good, where we have the world's largest rice collection. There are more than 130,000 accessions, including the wild Oryza species as well. Then there is in Norway, there is the Svalbard Global Seed Vault, which is again ex-situ, and this is the ultimate backup. That is, it is disaster-proof, apolitical insurance for the world's crop diversity. And then in China, we have wild rice nature reserves, which is in situ and state enforced. You will see over here, contrast is that it is legally stricter and there is direct state control over the designated reserve. So now over here, the call is that when it comes to the conservation, it has to be holistic. All right, we should have the in-situ conservation that we have seen already in the case of notifying the Sonitput's, wetland as the biodiversity heritage site. But at the same time, it is very important for the ex-situ conservation as well that can take through the gene banks or the NPPGR's national gene bank that is there. So that is the requirement that should be there for the conservation of the various species where they should be conserved in situ and ex situ as well. So that would be all in today's session. I hope that you have a complete idea why we have the Sonitput's wetland that had been declared as NHS or National Biodiversity Heritage Site. And also it is very important to note there that when it comes to the foundation is quite required for your preparation for the civil services, because you must have the basic idea about all the subjects which had been taught. So over here, if you are preparing for the civil services for 2027, 28 or 29, now you can enroll into the Resolution P2I batch, which is basically the batch for your GS or the Journal Studies Foundation. Now, this is based upon the SMART framework, where you get the structured classes, mentorship, assessment, and even the test series, and also you get the revision as well. Now, we have the evening batch, which we are starting off from the 7th of July. So again, you can join these batches by using the code that is BRS Live that will give you the maximum discount. So that would be all in this session. Thank you very much, guys, for joining me over here on the platform of StudyIQ. I will see you in the next. So till then, please take care of yourself. And also, do not forget to like the session, to share the session, and also to subscribe if you have not subscribed to the channel yet. So that would be all. Thank you and Jai Hind.